Welcome to the Your City podcast, where we get to know our neighbors so we can be good neighbors. I'm your host, Aaron Williams, and today we don't have a sponsor for this episode. If you want to sponsor an episode and have your message shared with our audience, you can contact our production company, Polymathic, at contact@polymathic.company. That's contact@polymathic.company if you're interested in sponsoring an episode of the Your City podcast. Today, I'm joined by local historian Kermit Dooley, who is the current president of the Gardendale Historical Society. We're going to talk to him about the history of Gardendale, how the Gardendale Historical Society engages with the community, and just sort of the general history of Gardendale. So, Mr. Dooley, thank you for coming onto the show.
You're quite welcome.
Yeah,
My pleasure.
Absolutely. So, first, let's talk about the Historical Society. What is the Gardendale Historical Society?
Well, it's an organization that was established to document and, as best we could, the history of the Gardendale area.
Mm-hmm.
It was originally known as Jugtown.
Yeah.
And the reason for that was that we had a pottery factory here.
Mm-hmm.
It was owned and run by a Methodist minister. I don't know this for sure, but my spin on it is he was coming through this area and preaching at different congregations, churches, and what have you. And he saw all the natural resources we had here for making pottery.
Okay, so just like good clay and things like that?
Good. You had clay, you had water, you had sufficient wood. So he established, he and his brother, he did the production part, and his brother, Nip, I believe was his name, would load his wagon and travel through the countryside and sell the pottery after his brother had produced all these things.
So they had a little business going.
They had a business going. I can't imagine they got much money out of it, but Nip would load his wagon and travel out and sell it. They made plates, saucers, cups, jugs.
They made it all.
They made all, everything that most of the early pioneers
Mm-hmm.
would use. He would go out through the countryside and sell it off, come back. His brother would have another production ready to go. But it was awful labor intensive.
Yeah.
Glass was beginning to come on the market about that time.
Mm-hmm.
They were here, I think, about 3 years, and glass started coming in. They were losing trade to glass and everything, so he wound up bankrupting the business.
So they spent all this time building up this clay business, and then all of a sudden new
Right.
technology comes in and just
New
wipes them out.
technology, another step, and
What year was all this?
I think it was like 1873
So right after the
to
Civil War, people are
1876.
the country's still kind of like putting itself back together.
Oh, yeah. You didn't have great roads to travel on and all. So it just became hard to make any money. It's so labor intensive, and the glass coming in. So he bankrupted the business, sold off the land and everything, and he went to Pittston, Alabama.
Okay.
And he opened a grist mill.
Okay, what is grist?
Well, that's where people would bring their corn to be ground into meal, flour, whatever.
Is this where grits come from?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Grits.
I'm not a fan of grits.
Yeah. It's he made a fortune in that business.
Okay, so that really took off.
Yeah, that took off. Everybody had corn,
Mm-hmm.
and they had to get it ground. And he had the means to grind it. The the mill was powered by water. Actually, it's Turkey Creek was the
That was the water that they
that
were
was the
using.
name of the creek, and we still have Turkey Creek today. And they had these huge grindstones. They'd grind it in the mill, flour, grits, whatever. But people brought their corn to him. He didn't have to go venture out and get it and bring it back.
He just had the equipment, and they would bring
He
it to
had
him.
the equipment. People had the need to get their corn ground.
Mm-hmm.
He made a fortune out there at Pinson.
And so this is sort of like the origin of where Gardendale started.
Well, actually, Gardendale started way before that. I mean,
Okay.
you know, we were just, Gardendale was built on an old Indian trail.
Okay.
It's what is now Main Street out there.
Yeah. Stouts Road.
Yeah, Stouts Road, which come out of North Alabama, Catocca County.
Mm-hmm.
It was an Indian trail that they used for hunting, trading. They would go all the way to the Gulf of Mexico by that trail.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it would split and divide up.
But at the time, that's all it was. It was just a road.
It was just a trail. It was a walking.
Yeah. Okay. Back before the cars, huh?
They didn't have no horses on it or anything.
Ah.
You walked
Yeah.
where you was going. That's what the Indians did. And the Indians was quite astute at the lay of the land.
Mm-hmm.
They always traveled the easiest way
Yeah.
to where they were going.
Yeah.
Like if they got to a big river, it's going to be hard to cross. They would cut and go up and find the headwater to that river and cross there, and they'd come back down to where they had wanted to cross before, but it's too swift or deep or whatever. They could read the lay of the land real well, the Indians. So that was, we didn't have a name back then.
Yeah.
Later on, it was called Jugtown.
And this was the gentleman and his brother
Yeah,
named it Jugtown.
that was back in the early 1800s
Mm-hmm.
that went on. Then the white man used those Indian paths to go into battle, trying to move the Indians out.
So was this during the Civil War when this was happening?
Before the Civil War.
Before the Civil War.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was long before. They used that to go to the Mexican War,
Okay.
Horseshoe Bend,
Mm-hmm.
the battle down at Horseshoe Bend. And it kept developing, and they got to the point they started using or moving cattle over it, horses, riding horses.
So this little footpath really evolved
It evolved
over the years.
As over the years. Now then, we got a big interstate road out there a little to the west, but that path was heavily used, and then they decided, well, we need to put toll gates on it,
Okay.
which they did.
So this was the Alabama state government that made this decision?
Yeah, and big landowners,
Oh, okay.
because most of them guys come out of the north. Now they the one that has the money and come down here and bought land for a little bit of nothing.
Yeah, you're shipping goods across this, what seems to be like a very well-paved path at this point.
Yeah. They would charge so much for a horse or a cow, pigs. They had a list of everything that had to go through the toll gate,
Okay.
and they charged so much for it. And they had men that maintained and kept certain sections of the road up. Like he'd have a 10-mile section that he'd be responsible for. He had to keep it in good repair, ditches, stumps out of the way, rocks, etc., where
Yeah,
you
yeah.
had good free travel.
I guess that's what the tolls are paying for, is
Right.
maintaining the road.
That's exactly right. And I do have some documentation of people that served certain sections of that road.
Oh, okay. And that was just like their day-to-day job.
That was their duty and day-to-day job. You know, like anything, it evolved and kept getting bigger. They kept widening the roads, you know, where it could get wagons, stagecoaches, or go to a river landing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of stuff was moved by boats. For example, coal was first found right in this area here.
Right in the Gardendale area?
Yeah.
And this was a national discovery.
On the Locust Fork, which is in Kimberly.
Mm-hmm.
They would see these seams of coal, black stuff. Well, they found out they could burn that. It made a heck of a fire.
Mm-hmm.
So they would build barges. They would go cut the timber, build a barge, load it with coal, and head to Mobile. They'd go down the Locust Fork up here, which went into the Warrior, the Black Warrior.
Okay, the Black Warrior River up here.
Yeah. And it'd take you all the way to Mobile down there. They had these black guys that knew how to light the coal and get it burning and everything. And one of them would go with the load of coal.
Hmm.
Now, a lot of times there was shoals down at Tuscaloosa. And sometimes the barges would wreck there, depending on the flow of the water and how deep it was. But what made it to Mobile, they sold. Then they sold the lumber to build houses.
Yeah, yeah.
They would build houses out of that lumber.
So they were just excavating the Gardendale area for the coal, for the lumber. How did this lead to people moving and living in Gardendale?
Well, people all along was moving into Gardendale. You had your very early pioneers that come in and see, we used to be Mississippi territory.
Mm-hmm.
We were Mississippi territory. We wasn't known as Alabama. That didn't come about 1819 when they established Alabama.
Thomas Jefferson made the Louisiana Purchase, which purchased all of the land up to the Mississippi River, and eventually Alabama became carved out of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, a lot of those men had traveled through this area going to fight in different wars. They liked what they saw here. All the natural resources. They could grow crops real well and all. So that's how it really started developing.
Now, what year did this population spike sort of start taking off? Was this in the later 1800s?
Yes. It was like 1802, 1803, and then later on, after they had traveled through here and saw what was available as far as growing crops and coal and coal mining and all that, it really started developing.
Very cool, very cool. And that led us to sort of where we're at today, just kept growing and growing,
Yeah.
right?
It kept, they kept establishing better road systems, etc., making money off of people, moving cattle, hogs, horses,
Mm-hmm.
and they charge so much for a person too.
Okay. On these toll roads.
On these toll roads, and it got to a point that it really grew. I got a list of books here that I can give you that we got. We like to get old history books.
Yeah.
And we got a lot of them.
Up here at the Historical Museum.
Yeah, in the museum. There's a lot of them up there on my desk, but this is a book list, and I think I got an extra one up there I'll give you. You can see how many books we've accumulated.
Oh, yeah, there's a ton of books listed in here. So you have all of this up here at the Gardendale Historical Society,
Yeah,
right?
they're in these books over here.
And anybody can come up here.
They can come up here and come back here and sit down and go through those books.
Yeah.
Get information out of them.
How long has the Gardendale Historical Society been established?
They used to have a thing called America in Bloom.
Okay.
That would come to little towns and they'd grade them on different things. Well, Gardendale got a good review with the exception they didn't have a historical society.
Oh, okay. A little point knocked off.
Yeah. That didn't sit well with the mayor and all. He got with Doris Ragsdale, who was in the local senior club. He charged her with forming a historical society, and Doris did. She did a good job, and I saw where in a publication that they was looking for charter members and all.
Yeah.
That's when I got involved.
So that's how you joined.
Yeah, I joined up and as a charter member and got involved in it.
Let me ask you, Mr. Dooley, how is the Gardendale Historical Society involved in the community? You know, it's obviously a building out here right next to the Civic Center. How is it involved in the community?
Well, when I became president of the society, I immediately got after the city fathers about we had to have a building.
Okay.
To put our books, etc., whatever we was collecting, artifacts, which you can see we've collected a heck of a lot of artifacts.
Yeah, there's a lot in here.
Yeah, we've been very fortunate, and people have donated a lot of good artifacts. I guess I pestered them to death. I tried to get them to buy this building, that building. I'd find a building for sale, and I'd go to them and say, hey, we can get this building for such and such. Well, we ain't got the money. And then one day, the mayor came to me and he said, I've got you a building. I said, man, that's great. I said, where is it? He said, it's the old North Jefferson News building. That's what used to be in here, North Jefferson News.
Okay, so this was a newspaper.
Well, before that, this was actually built for Bell South. This is where their first exchange was at, and all the telephone equipment. The big cables and all are still buried in the street right out there.
Interesting that, like, the building that you got ended up having such a, interesting history.
Yeah, it had a good bit of history there.
Yeah.
That's how we got a building.
Well, cool.
And then, I started collecting display cases, and all these display cases I got them donated. I had to buy one or two, but they're from the early 1800s. And I was very fortunate to get them. I mean, the work that's in those things, you don't see that type work in this day and time.
Just the craftsmanship of it.
Yeah, it's good craftsmanship. They took their time and did good work. But all these display cases date back to the early 1800s.
How does stuff get added to the museum?
Well, we have people that come by and decide to donate. They have various things. They'll come by and say, I've got so-and-so, like that spinning wheel up there.
Mm-hmm.
They say, would you like to have a spinning wheel? Gosh, yeah.
Yeah. Now, are you guys just interested in anything that's kind of like an antique, or are you looking specifically for, hey, these are antiques that are important to Gardendale's history?
We really look for antiques. And in the course of it, we get antiques that's, important to this area.
Yeah.
Like that old wood chest up there.
Mm-hmm.
It was made by a guy over in Fieldstown, made by hand.
And there's just a bunch of that stuff here in the museum that's,
right,
made from around the Alabama, Birmingham area, or maybe even specifically in Gardendale itself.
A lot of it was made right here in Gardendale.
Wow.
You see the Lum and Abner Museum up there, the picture of that.
Yeah, there's a picture up here of the Historical Society Museum that we're in currently. It says, Lum and Abner visit our museum.
That was donated by Linda and J.D. Weeks. J.D., of course, he's passed on now, was a member of the Lum and Abner Society, and he'd go to their meetings every year.
What is the Lum and Abner Society?
It was established out in Arkansas, I believe, and they used to have a radio program. It was put on by Lum and Abner. They're real funny.
And they just talk about history on that?
Yeah.
Very cool. How did you come to be interested in history to the point where you were like, I mean, you're president of this historical society now, you have to be interested in history a little bit. How did that come along?
Well, I've always liked history.
Yeah. Just even when you were learning it in school?
When I was in school, I really wasn't that interested in it.
Oh, okay.
But after I got out and I got into society, I saw what I was missing. And I'm the type, history is history. I don't care if it's bad history or good history. It's still history.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people try to write the bad history out. I don't believe in that.
Why not?
I believe we need to know history as it was.
Okay. It's important to preserve the truth of it.
Yes, to me it is. To a lot of people, no. And you can look at the early history books, school history books that I've got up there, and you can see how they start writing it out and all.
I think it's important to make sure that we're teaching history accurately, but it's difficult to do that because there's a certain matter of perspective in history, right? So, for instance, just to give an example, if the American Revolution had failed, we wouldn't celebrate them as founding fathers. We would look back on them in our British history, right? We'd say, oh yeah, Yeah, George Washington and them, they performed an insurrection. Like they attacked the crown.
Right.
So the perspective of history is, really dependent on the culture. So it can be kind of difficult to maintain the truth of history, especially as you go. I don't really know what the solution to that is, but trying to
I
cover
don't
up,
either.
trying to what you're saying, where it's like, hey, we're going to write out, we're going to omit certain parts of history that aren't pleasant. We don't want to teach people that these events happen.
Yeah.
I think you're right that there's risk in that because there are lessons to be learned that are forgotten.
That's
It's like,
true.
hey, we don't want to teach that these events happened. And it's like, why not? Well, those are shameful events, or those are mistakes that we don't want repeated. And it's like, well, if you don't teach people why it was a mistake, you're setting yourself up for
Yeah.
repetition.
That's the way I see it. I mean,
Okay.
you've got to learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
And, we all make mistakes. And if it's bad history, I still believe in teaching it where you don't go back and make that same bad mistakes in history
Yeah.
as you move along. I believe in preserving history, good or bad.
I think that's valuable. I think so.
I really do. And I try to do that. And, we've got things, for example, I was looking at this picture right here.
What's it a picture of?
That's coal miners. Now they've progressed to the point that they got battery lights. You can tell.
Yeah.
They've progressed to the point they found out, hey, we gotta have battery for these lamps.
Yeah.
We can't have an open flame.
Yeah, because that could lead to
That's
explosions.
disastrous
Yeah.
for us. So there they have. They progressed to having battery lamps. Now, that's men probably at the old Sloss furnaces making pig iron.
Yeah. So we've got looks like a painting of men working on the furnaces.
Right. There was two murals that hung on the wall in the old original Gardendale school that was up on Mitchell Hill Road. It's been torn down and gone for years. Those murals was on the walls there between the first and the second floor.
Mm-hmm.
I seen them every day
When you were going to school.
when I was going to school there. And in later years, I started trying to find them. They had disappeared. The school had been torn down at that time. They closed it and started demolishing it. After the school was torn down and everything, I started looking for those murals.
Yeah.
I had always thought that they were painted directly on the wall, but they were not.
They were hung.
Yeah, there was two big murals that was hung, and I started looking for them, and I thought they were gone. And I was having a conversation with a young lady that was in the Chamber of Commerce one day, and she had a friend that had a cabin up in Gatlinburg.
Mm-hmm.
And she had just got back from a visit up there. Her friend had let her use the cabin. Well, she got to telling me about the beautiful old painting that was hanging on the wall up there
Yeah.
in this friend's cabin. And when she started talking about it, and I said, oh, my Lord, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I've been looking for that thing for ages.
So you had finally tracked it down.
It finally came into focus again. So I called the lady that had the cabin. I said, look, will you let me go up there and make a photo of it so I can put it in the archives at the Historical Society? She said, well, you certainly can, Kermit.
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay. She said, but I tell you what, I've got the other one over here in my basement.
So she had both of them.
She had both of them. She said, if you'll come over here, I'll give it to you.
Oh, well, that was kind of her.
I said, good Lord. I said, I can't believe this. So I got my son, and we immediately got my old truck, drove over there, and picked that one up.
Yeah.
And then she said, I'll bring the other one back down here and I'll donate it to you too. So she wound up donating both
of those
murals.
Do you find yourself having to actively search for artifacts like that type of stuff often, or is it more passive where people bring stuff to you?
It's more passive now. I mean, that was something that I really wanted to get. I was looking just to get photos and wound up with the murals.
You got them. You got them.
Yeah.
So.
And ironically, I put them in the Civic Center up here.
Yeah. Okay.
Hung them up high. Had a ceremony up there where we dedicated him. As it turned, and what's so ironic is it turned out one of our members, who's now deceased, I was showing those things at a meeting of the Historical Society at the Martha Moore library down there.
Okay.
And she said, Kermit, I painted on those things. When she was in the art class up there, the art class did it. They had a French art instructor, and he had them, the students, to paint those.
Is this mural still up at the Civic Center right now?
No. It's right back here.
Oh, it's in the Historical Society Museum.
I've got it down here. I had to move it down here. I had it up there initially. Well, we didn't have this building at that time, and I put them up high where people couldn't reach them and maybe, tear them or whatever. We had to have them refurbished, spent over $10,000.
Cleaning them up.
They had watermarks on it. They had tears, etc. I used to go to meetings at Birmingham at the museum down there, and a guy was down there giving a talk about some murals he was redoing in the courthouse.
Yeah.
Well, I said, boy, that sounds interesting. So afterwards, I got him and I said, I got something I want you to look at. He looked at it and wound up giving me a figure on doing it.
And that's how you got him cleaned up.
So I raised the money and got it done.
Wow.
It took a while, but he did a great job on it. And they were hanging up there. And this is where black guys come in up there one day and went to the desk there, the girls working at the desk, and they told them, they said, don't be surprised if this place is shot all to pieces because of those paintings you got hanging out there. They looked at them as something racist.
Oh, okay.
Say. Scared those girls to death. I mean, you can well imagine. They thought, Lord, we're in the line of fire. So the mayor had them pulled down and put in storage up there at the Civic Center. I pitched a fit to find out who had taken them down, and Stan told me, he said, Mr. Dooley, I did that. I'm guilty. Due to the threats they made.
Okay.
And all. But he stored them up there and kept them in good repair and all. Anyway, we wound up with them back down here, and they're hanging right back there on the wall.
Okay.
we display them, and we published that we would protect them. And that was history, and that's all it was. It wasn't to put anything up that was racist, etc. That was just part of history. That is how it was back then.
Gotcha.
So,
Let me ask you, are there any historical sites still existing in Gardendale that people who are interested in the history of Gardendale could go see?
Ebenezer Church, built in 1860.
Built in 1860. And where's that located at in Gardendale?
That is on Snow Rogers Road.
Okay.
Church is still standing. It's not in that original state. It's had some additions to it. But John Belcher and his third wife, John Belcher came out of Tennessee and migrated into Alabama in 1823. And he started buying land, acquiring land, and what have you. On his third wife, two previous wives had died. His third wife, I think her name was Susan. They had that property up here on Snow Rogers Road. He owned all the timber and everything. He had the timber cut off of the property, milled up there. They had a sawmill.
Mm-hmm.
He built it, took donations from people so much. They either worked on building the church or they paid so much a day for somebody else to work. And that's how the church got built.
Mm-hmm.
It's still there today, Ebenezer Church.
So people can go and visit it if they'd like to.
They can go and visit it. I had the opportunity to buy it, tried to get the city to buy it. Of course, they're short of funds. Didn't happen. But I know the couple that's got it right today, and I could still buy it today if they would put up the money for it.
Yeah.
I was hoping we could get it, but it didn't happen. But anyway, people can go to that church right today.
Yeah.
There was a cemetery associated with it. Well, it got lost over the years. I read letters from different Belchers, etc., and I finally decided, I said, well, I know where that doggone cemetery is at.
All right.
And I don't know if you ever heard of it, but I do grave dowsing. That's like witching for water.
Okay.
But I use 2 metal rods, and I can locate a grave and lay it out side to side, head to foot.
Okay.
The head's always going to be facing west, where when the sun rises, it rises in their face.
That's the tradition.
That's the tradition. But every grave I located, I can tell whether it's a man or a woman or a child. Of course, it's easy to tell a child by the length of the grave and what have you. So anyway, I read a lot of correspondence and everything. I said, well, I think I know where it's at. Because they always buried on high ground.
Mm-hmm.
We had a member in the Historical Society, Charles Glaze. His dad had owned, I think, 80 acres up there. Well, his dad died, and Charles started developing this property. And he sold this piece of property, and the guy built a house. And the guy told him, said, I don't like those depressions back there in my backyard. I want them filled in.
Okay.
So Charles filled them in. And he was telling me about it. I said, well, you filled in graves. I said, that was graves.
Mm-hmm.
I said, those shallow depressions, I said, when I find graves, I grade them several ways. If it's a shallow depression, they was buried, the body just wrapped and buried.
Mm-hmm.
If they had a deep depression, they was buried in a box. And as that box rotted away, they'd have a deep depression.
Mm-hmm.
I said, you covered over some graves, Charles. He said, yeah, I believe it was graves there. Said the guy didn't want them depressions in his backyard. He wanted to grow a garden there, which he did.
Hmm.
And I got Charles one day. I said, will you, the house was already built and everything, and the guy had lived in it, growed a garden. I said, Charles, can you take me up there and point out where you think those depressions was?
Yeah.
And he said, yeah. So I met him. He pointed it out, and I dowsed them, and they were graves.
Mm-hmm.
We've got, and it's registered with the state of Alabama and the state archives down there, John Belcher Cemetery.
So you discovered it.
So we discovered it. I've located like 8 grave sites up there in that cemetery. It's registered with the state now. They can't do nothing with it.
Okay, so now it's a state historical property.
It's right.
It's like a historical landmark now.
When I dedicated it, they came from Montgomery, and I've got the pictures and everything. And we had a big ceremony up there.
Very cool.
So it's, and we got a historic marker up there.
Hmm.
John Belcher Cemetery. And
so that and the Ebenezer Methodist Church are both historical landmarks
that's
that
exactly
people can go
right.
visit that are located here in Gardendale.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest events that have happened in the history of Gardendale?
I think the Magnolia event.
The Magnolia Festival?
Yeah.
Yeah?
It is huge. Kathleen Phillips, she does a fantastic job with that and putting it on. And we'll have 40 to 50,000 people that show up for that thing.
Wow. That is really big.
I mean, vendors buy their spots, and we always open the museum up for people to come in free and what have you. And,
yeah.
And I get people that, like soap maker, broom maker, do forge work.
People who know the old craft styles
Right.
and things like that.
Old craft style. I've had pottery makers come over and have a pottery set up out here. So we always look forward to the Magnolia Festival. Of course, they hadn't had it because of the...
They recently did have it. I remember they had it a couple months ago.
Yeah.
I don't know. I say a couple months ago. It's probably been like 6 or 8 months. But I do remember they had it this spring, I think.
Yeah, but the one before, I think they had to cancel it.
Yeah.
Because of the virus and all.
Well, let's finish up on 2 questions here. Let me ask you, Mr. Dooley, what is something that you love about Gardendale?
The people in it,
Yeah.
and our administration, that they really work for the people.
Yeah.
And a lot of people probably don't think that they do, but I know how they, especially the current administration.
Mr. Hoagland.
Stan and his council members and all, he has the people of Gardendale in his mind every day and making everything better for them.
Yeah.
Look at our ball games and parks that we've got around as a result of that.
Yeah.
They involved in the Red Rock Trail, etc. I like the people we have in Gardendale.
And the leadership.
And the leadership, especially the leadership, is great. I don't think you can find better.
What is something that you think Gardendale can improve on?
Probably acquiring more property for development. And they have got some good property right now for development. And they've got some people that's put money up to hold that property for development.
So expanding the city, growing the city, finding new investors and things like that. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I recently talked to the mayor, and I think that that's a big initiative that he's trying to pursue. So.
Oh, yeah, it is. Stan works tirelessly on that. He really does. And, everybody is not going to like the administration. Somebody's always thinking they're not doing good, etc. But
everybody has different ideas about how government should be involved.
Yeah. But I think we got a great bunch of government.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. If somebody is interested in the Gardendale Historical Society, how can they get involved in the Historical Society?
Well, we got, they can join the society. And once we get to running again, hopefully next year, and start having our talks we always had somebody. We met at the Martha Moore Library down there.
Yeah.
And they give us space to meet, and it accommodated us good. And I would find speakers that could come and speak on history.
Very cool.
And we always had a room full of people, and we had some great speakers. Tried to always gear it around historic topics.
Yeah.
And it worked real well, and I hope to get back to that. Everybody, well, we wouldn't have an empty chair in the room during those times and talks, and I hope to get back to that point.
Excellent. Well, before we close out, is there anything else that you'd like to add, Mr. Dooley?
No, I will just say I appreciate y'all's interest in Gardendale and all. And I hope you get information you need for your podcast.
Well, thank you. We're hoping to share this with the people of Gardendale so that, more people can sort of hear about how the Historical Society is set up and what it does and everything like that. We're hoping to spark more interest in the community.
Well, that would be good if we could do that. Everybody, generally, statements we hear when people come through that door, gosh, I can't believe what y'all got in here.
There's just so much.
It's just fantastic. I had no idea.
Yeah.
They're amazed. But we do have a lot of stuff, and we have a lot of stuff in storage that we don't have on display yet. We're going to continue to grow.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Dooley, for joining me today. Thank you for listening to the Your City podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Mr. Kermit Dooley. If you liked the show, you can follow the Your City Podcast on Facebook and stay up to date with us. And you can find our episodes on Spotify, YouTube, Odyssey, or your preferred podcasting app. Feel encouraged to leave us a review so that we know how you like the show and so that more people will be able to discover it. Thank you again for listening. We'll catch you on the next one.